The dark cosmos. Stay cosmic.
In one desolate corner of the state of Nevada, in a stretch of desert not even tourists are interested in exploring, a man made the greatest mistake of his life. Toby Clayton was described by friends as a bold individual with occasionally erratic behavior. Although his eccentricities had doomed him to mostly solitary adventures, he thrived under the spotlight. As a result, when he wandered on that rarely visited piece of land, he made sure to livestream every moment of it on his phone. You think you know the state of Nevada, but you don't. I bet none of you watching have been even close to where I am right now, Toby boasted to his online audience as he reached the top of a small hill. Am I lost? Maybe a little bit, who cares? I'll survive. What matters here is that I have strangely good phone service. Do you know what that means? There could be a military base nearby. If they shoot me on sight and I catch it on camera, that would be epic. Or, even better, I could be close to some powerful energy source of extraterrestrial nature. I think that... Wait, hold on. What is that? Holy shit! What the hell is that? Take a look. Toby's excitement was immeasurable. This mystery was exactly the kind of thrill he searched for with every unadvisable adventure. He switched cameras on his phone and revealed to his public the source of his delight. Beyond the hill he was standing on, there was a wide expanse of plain land. It was nearly empty, just another dry chunk of desert. However, near the center of it was the strangest thing Toby Clayton had ever seen. He jogged toward it, barely containing his elation. With every step he took, the image turned clearer on the camera. In the middle of that unassuming piece of land, there were 6 large rocks distributed in a wide circle, with about 30 yards between each of them. They were nearly identical in shape and size, elongated like stalactites, and taller than a 2-story house. Up until that point, that didn't have to be a source of alarm or excitement. Even when Toby noticed that the bottoms of the rocks were glowing a fiery red color, surely that could have a reasonable explanation. However, when he was close enough, it was revealed that these giant rocks were all floating a couple of feet above the ground. Suddenly, Toby Clayton was making history. Look at this! Oh my god, it's the coolest shit I've ever seen! He exclaimed to his online followers as he reached his destination. This is insane, right? Look! These things are massive! They must weigh a ton. How do you explain that they're floating, huh? How? And look at the glowing bits. Do you think it's burning? Is it something like lava? Okay. Now, dare me to touch it, and I swear I will. In the minutes it took Toby to get down the hill and reach that strange location, his audience multiplied tenfold. He was already relatively popular for his adventurous content, but this quickly broke the containment of his circle of friends. Everybody watching told someone else about it. People talked about the guy who found magical rocks in the Nevada desert on every social media page. Soon enough, he was trending. Powerful people from diverse areas were made aware of him. Different groups were searching for his location. News articles and reports were already getting written. And then, everything changed. Toby Clayton smiled at the camera one last time and said, I can't resist. I have to touch it. It's going to be a killer picture. If you're watching, please capture it. Make me famous. If I burn my hand, it'll be worth it. Then he switched cameras again. From all over the country and beyond, thousands of people watched attentively. The camera showed his extended hand approaching the rock slowly. About 4 feet from the bottom of the rock looked on fire. It radiated an unnatural red shade. It cast a red glow on Toby's hand and the ground underneath. He wasn't wrong. It looked like lava, burning up without dripping down to the ground. Here we go, were Toby Clayton's famous last words. The second that his hand touched the rock, the live feed flickered for a second, and then the phone was dropped to the ground. It didn't move again. There were no sounds, no sign of Toby Clayton, and no stopping of the live stream. It was the eeriest thing, for people to continue watching while absolutely nothing happened. No sounds, no movement, just that strange piece of rock floating above the ground, and thousands of spectators across the screen, waiting for an explanation that might never come. Among the spectators of Toby Clayton's unfortunate adventure was a member of the Nevada State Police. This man, bored out of his mind, had to keep an eye on the livestream since Toby wandered into a rarely visited area, in case he brought some trouble with him. As it turned out, trouble was already there. As the mystery grew and more details about the strange markers in the middle of nowhere were revealed, more and more agents of the Department of Public Safety were made aware of this sudden oddity. It spread beyond the state of Nevada. In fact, when the news reached the desk of the chief of police, the orders came right from Washington. Shortly after Toby Clayton vanished from the screen, Chief Bruce Thomas received an important call and video depicting the last few seconds recorded of the subject during his live stream. Then, he addressed his assistant chief. "We're moving down to this location immediately. I want the best of the department with me. As of this moment, this becomes our #1 priority," Bruce said, giving out orders and preparing to leave his desk for an indeterminate amount of time. "As soon as we're there, I want the perimeter strictly secured. Nobody gets closer than us to this object. It's a delicate balance. There are concerns about this being some form of terrorist attack. Some people are taking the guy's absurd claims of alien activity seriously. It could be nothing, but it already got too much attention. We have to be rigorous, but we can't make a fuss. The higher-ups won't send anyone else in case this is a scam. Our only company will be a government-assigned scientific team led by Dr. Samantha Parker. Nobody else gets in. Understood? Now go." Before Samantha Parker even got the call to announce that she would be in charge of the scientific team assigned to understand the mystery of half a dozen strange pieces of rock in the middle of nowhere in Nevada, she was already aware of it. Her assistant, Dr. Henry Lee, had been following the livestream closely as soon as a colleague mentioned something about a hiker finding bizarre elements in a secluded area. "This has to be unnatural or, at very least, scientifically modified. That's my first impression," Henry told her. "It's incredibly odd that nobody has noticed them before. We have the means to understand it. We would have been the first ones to know. So the obvious explanation is that, up until this moment, this was protected by the government. The news of this discovery will be buried within days, I assure you." Their conversation was interrupted by a rare and urgent call that changed the trajectory of their careers. "I'm sorry to prove you wrong, Henry, but it seems the government is more shocked than anybody else about this revelation," Samantha said after the call. "You were right about one thing, though. We are the only ones that can figure out what this is. There's a jet coming for us right now. Get everyone ready." Finally, after what felt like the longest journey of his life, the chief of the Nevada Police, Bruce Thomas, arrived at the infamous location of the 6 rocks from God knows where. The reason he was so tense was that during the entire move from Carson City, all he received was bad news, starting with the fact that, when the local police arrived at the scene, there was no body to be found. Toby Clayton's body had really disappeared. When Bruce Thomas reached his destination, everything was worse than he imagined. First, there were the endless rows of vehicles trying to get closer. Bloodhounds from the press and casual curious civilians had made their pilgrimage to the scene of the crime. They were bothersome, but somewhat expected. His men could keep them at bay. The real problems were further up ahead. He heard one of them before he got to see them. "Vultures! All of you are vultures! Criminals! Murderers! No, we won't let your greed corrupt one more inch of this precious planet! No, we won't go, and we won't be stopped!" Chief Thomas sighed and jumped out of his vehicle the second it parked. He put on his sunglasses and addressed his assistant. "Kick out all the casual onlookers. Threaten arrests if you have to. The press can mention a natural phenomenon in the desert, but we won't tell them a word more. Not yet. I know our 2 biggest problems. I'll go talk to them." Then he marched through the small crowd of police officers toward the heart of the issue. He didn't dwell too long on the massive rocks floating off the ground. It was an impressive sight for sure, but his job wasn't to understand them. It was to protect them, or protect his country from them. He focused his attention on the woman still lecturing a medium-sized crowd that cheered for her. "Excuse me, Bruce Thomas, Chief of Nevada State Police. May I have a word?" he said when he was close enough. "Gladly. My name is Carla Ruiz. Don't think of me as a leader, but a spokesperson of the interests of a kind group of people concerned for the well-being of our planet," the woman said. She jumped off her improvised stage standing up on a small boulder, and she waved her crowd away. I would like to say it's a pleasure to meet you, but I'm afraid I don't trust cops. However, I'm willing to offer you the benefit of the doubt, Chief. Tell me we want the same thing. You and your boys in blue are here to protect this wonder from our Mother Nature, aren't you? My job is to keep the people of Nevada safe, Bruce replied. At the moment, that means keeping you all away from this thing, so nobody else gets hurt. Right. Well, then who's going to protect this beauty? The rocks. You want me to assign someone to protect those rocks? Bruce's condescending tone might have been a miscalculation. The leader of the ecologist group smiled mischievously at him. No, sir. I will be their protector. My friends, my family, my people won't be removed from this location by any means until we guarantee the safety of this natural marvel. Don't you see? This could be a new wonder of the world. I'm optimistic, sir. But do you know what we really fear? That this is a manifestation of the Earth's sickness, a consequence of the abuse of our home planet. This is a cry for help from the ground, and we must listen. We must. By then, Carla's crowd had closed in around her again, and they started chanting along with her words. They were, at least, an efficient group. They had brought signs. They were painting their t-shirts and bodies with slogans or awful drawings of the floating rocks. We'll talk later, Miss Ruiz, Bruce said and turned his back on her. In the meantime, I'll go talk to the cult. I don't think they're a cult, sir, Carla called after him, but Bruce waved her off. Not yet, he grumbled under his breath. The police had mostly managed to secure the location, but it had been impossible to remove two particularly passionate groups, the ecologists represented by Carla and the religious folk led by a woman named Annabeth Miller. While Carla and her people were passionate if not cheerfully prancing around the stones, Annabeth and her entourage were eerily motionless. They had been devotedly praying for hours. Some of them were kneeling on the hard ground of the desert with remarkable persistence. Not enough to impress Bruce Thomas, though. Excuse me, he said, approaching the group. I beg you, Heavenly Father, listen to our desperate prayers. Annabeth continued praying as if no one was speaking to her. I'm Bruce Thomas, Chief of Nevada State Police. Have mercy on us, Lord. Aim your divine light on this land. May I speak to you for one moment? Protect us from the heathens and the non-believers that threaten your holy creations. Hey! Bruce snapped and raised his voice. He stepped closer in front of the woman, so he blocked her view of the rocks, and he looked down at her. Ma'am, I am trying to be reasonable with you when I really shouldn't need to be. If you don't want to return the favor, I'm not afraid to use force to take you and your people away from here. Annabeth stopped praying at least, but she took her time before looking up at the man in front of her. Her expression was so intense and conceited, even while kneeling down. It almost seemed like she was the one looking down at Bruce. A less powerful man would have shuddered under her icy stare. We will not move from here. It's our divine right to stand here and watch over this monument, Annabeth said. This event is clearly a sign from God, a manifestation of his message to us. We will pray until the full meaning is revealed only to us. Maybe each stone represents a deadly sin, and the first victim was just a tragic accident. That's what he was, Bruce interrupted her. This whole thing is a natural phenomenon that smarter people than you are about to solve, and we still need to find the victim's body. You won't find it, Bruce ignored her. He knew she didn't know what she was talking about. She couldn't. I'm forced to respect your religious demonstration. For now. Don't give me a reason to drag all of you away from here, Bruce warned her. He started walking away. She started praying again, and right on time, a new set of trucks arrived on the scene. Finally, some rational people. We can get some serious work done now. Bruce grumbled on his way to meet the scientific team. As they descended from their vehicle, Samantha and Henry were already planning their first moves. I'm telling you, Sam, we mustn't rule out the possibility that this is some extraterrestrial material, Henry said. If these markers arrived on our surface from outer space, NASA would have noticed and sent their own people, not us, Samantha retorted. We got aerial shots of the location already. It's a perfect circle, Sam. You know what that reminds me of? Crop circles. Samantha laughed. Circles aren't that impressive. Ancient civilizations built hundreds of things more impressive than this. Think like a scientist, Henry. Get me a scan of the ground as profound as possible. I want to check the possibility that the markers somehow raised to the surface from underground. In the meantime, we'll start with a thorough scan of each marker. Are they empty? Are they completely solid? What could be inside? How much can we find out about them before we make first contact? When we do, we'll take samples of each marker, starting from the tops, and we'll work our way down to the bottoms. Speaking of which, get me a reading on the temperature of every inch of them. What else? Get me every type of scan possible on the space between the bottom of the markers and the ground. And also, Henry, let's try to work from outside the circle. Yes, I'm wary of this design. It might not be arbitrary. We must consider the possibility of a magnetic force or similar energy at the center of it all. In the meantime, I will... Oh, there you are. She finally spotted Bruce Thomas, who greeted her politely. Dr. Parker, pleasure to meet you. I'm Chief Bruce Thomas, at your service, he said. Nice to meet you, Chief, Samantha said and shook his hand. We want to get started on the markers as soon as possible. Markers? Bruce wondered. The rocks. It's the scientific term we assign them. Now my team is setting up our equipment and we'll have the very first tentative results within minutes. There's no time to lose. You'll see. I fear the possibility of some type of radiation or other lethal effects from these markers. That would demand that all of us retreat immediately and only continue the studies with the necessary precautions. But I must say, nothing about this looks man-made. You can tell your superiors it's highly unlikely this is some sort of terrorist attack. Bruce nodded in acknowledgement, but said, I'll wait for the conclusive results, Doctor. Very well, Samantha said with a shrug. Now, I hear there were some intrusive groups in the area. It's in all our best interest to get them far away from here. May I speak with them? Bruce had to stifle a laugh at that. You'll just have to turn around, he said. Samantha did as he said and marveled at the impeccable timing of two women followed by their respective groups, marching toward her. I knew it! I knew you would bring men of science to this holy place! Annabeth exclaimed. I'm giving you one chance to say you're here to study, not to destroy, Carla warned Samantha. Disrespecting this shrine will earn us the wrath of God! You scavengers, you just want to exploit and profit from this place too! Stop it now! Bruce barked at them, trying to get some semblance of control. Even Henry tried to step in, saying, Come on, let's all calm down. Surely we all want the same thing. However, Samantha wasn't paying any mind to them. Her focus was elsewhere. Her eyes widened. She gasped and then said, Henry, make all the scans and tests on the markers our second priority. We just found a more urgent subject. She walked past her assistant, past the chief of police, past every protester, ignoring every person trying to hold her back, get her attention, or stand in her way. When she was at the front of the group, everyone finally noticed what she was staring at. The markers seemed to come alive. The glowing tips at the bottom seemed to burn brighter, and they all quivered simultaneously. The ground underneath their feet was vibrating lightly, but enough to be noticeable and make people lean on each other. Everyone started stepping back from the markers just in time, because the smaller rocks on the ground were suddenly lifting from the ground, an inch or two at first. Then they shuddered their way up, several feet off the ground, until they started rotating. A dozen rocks around each of the markers. This was more than enough to have everyone in awe, but Samantha Parker was standing in front of one marker in particular that displayed a more disquieting performance. Samantha's instincts were screaming for her to run away, to find shelter, to just step away from the gigantic piece of rock hovering above the ground and trembling like none of the others were. Was it going to fall? Break? Move higher? Lower? Sam, get back here! Henry called to her from a few steps behind. Dr. Parker, please step back, for your own safety. Maybe she's the chosen one. That's it! The scientists already contaminated the area! More and more yells came from the crowd, but Samantha crouched down in front of the marker and watched the transformation at the bottom. At first, it was so blurry, so indistinct, that Samantha first believed it was a sign that the markers really caused a hallucinogenic effect. Even when she first saw the outline of a human hand, she scrambled for reasonable explanations. Anything but the truth. But the rock kept burning. Samantha felt the heat on her face, and the rocks spinning around the marker got faster, creating an air current that got stronger and stronger. And then, the red rock, which looked like congealed lava, showed more than the outline of a hand. As Samantha watched, a face appeared from inside the rock, an open mouth, closed eyes, the silhouette of a screaming face. It moved left and right. It shuddered as it silently yelled. Samantha couldn't move away. She couldn't blink. She could hardly breathe. The face got closer and closer to the surface of the rock. Then a second hand appeared, and impossible as it seemed, they started pushing against the rock. The markers seemed not only solid, but hard and heavy. And yet, the bottom of it was transforming. It was melting, expanding, and stretching like plastic. The hands pressed against it, followed by the face. The fingers clawed at the rock like they could break through a membrane. And they did. Under the utter shock of Samantha and the large crowd behind her, from the bottom of the rock, a man fell down. Some of the crowd dispersed. The ecologists were scared away, but the religious group was more fascinated than before. The chief of police ordered to strengthen the perimeter, but only Samantha understood the severity of the situation. The man was covered in a thin layer of a blood-like substance. His body was violently shivering, but the movement of his chest was undeniable. He was breathing. As if this collection of facts wasn't impossible enough, Samantha most definitely recognized that face. It was Toby Clayton, the man who vanished after touching the marker. What followed was a flurry of movement. Great turmoil took over the scene. Finally, some individuals were inspired to leave the location, which, unfortunately, meant that the rumor of Toby Clayton's bizarre reappearance broke through the barrier of the police. Regular people drove from nearby cities for a chance to glimpse the markers, even from afar. The press got wild and desperate to break into the closed circle around the marker. Chief Thomas had to call for backup, and security was strengthened. The most reckless ecologists stood their ground around Carla's encouraging calls.
We must protect this zone. We can't let them get away with more damage to our world. Don't let them exploit one more natural wonder.
Similarly, Annabeth Miller's prayers got louder than ever. Her followers cried all around as she called.
He has returned. In body and soul, he was brought back to us. Like Jesus, like our Savior. This is a sign.
Several tents were built within the perimeter, where the scientific team did their best to work despite the roar of the crowd outside the tent. Tent A was destined for the equipment meant for studying the markers. In Tent B, Toby Clayton was in recovery, getting cleaned up and checked by the medical team in protective suits. In Tent C, Samantha Parker and her team discussed the first results of the tests.
Let's start with the markers, please,
Samantha said.
Nearly identical shape and size for each marker. 17 feet tall, 3 feet radius,
Henry told her.
17 feet? That can't be right.
You're right, Henry reluctantly agreed.
The bottom of the markers? That area eludes all our scanners. We estimate it's about 3 feet long, but we can't get any conclusive results. 80% of the mass of the markers maintains a stable temperature. We determined the bottom has increased temperature, but when our devices get too close, same as everything else, they start malfunctioning, and there's no clear answer. The density,
let me guess, Samantha interrupted with a sigh.
80% of it appears like completely normal compact rock, but there's no way to know what's in the lower section of it.
Henry nodded.
Correct. Now here's something you'll be interested in. You mentioned the possibility of a magnetic pull, right? Well, we confirmed there's actually an electric current between the 6 markers. Each one is a source of energy, but there's most definitely a connection between them. And this is just a theory, but when Toby Clayton was brought back, the energy must have been significantly increased. Do we think it was a natural reaction? I'm tempted to believe something, or someone, activated it.
Damn it, are we going to have to tell the chief that it could actually be terrorism?
Samantha wondered. She got up and started pacing the length of the tent while her colleagues watched apprehensively. No, I still can't believe it, she said. There's no way this kind of technology exists in another country, not while we're unaware of it. And certainly there's no way they could have brought it here without national security noticing. Same as an extraterrestrial explanation. This couldn't have fallen from space without a satellite catching the movement. I have 2 more options, but they're ambitious to say the least. Henry, would you like the honors?
Samantha, are you talking about time traveling? Henry asked, jumping out of his seat.
Because if that's one of your ideas, my God, the possibilities. Hey, maybe we could figure out something about the age of the material once we get a sufficiently large sample.
The scientists' discussion was interrupted by a sudden clamor coming from outside the tent. They rushed outside, and the first thing they heard was an argument between the religious leader and the chief of police.
That man is not Toby Clayton. That is a fake duplicate from hell. An imitation. A trick from the devil.
Annabeth Miller was yelling as she approached the scientific tent, as if her words alone counted for proof.
Ma'am, this is the exact same man that went missing.
Bruce Thomas shouted right behind her.
He's not!
Annabeth insisted desperately.
He doesn't know our God. He doesn't know this world. He doesn't recognize his own cell phone, name, and life.
The argument continued, but Samantha pulled her assistant closer and said,
I mean, she shouldn't have access to that information, but if she's right.
Henry nodded and said,
They could try to explain it with post-traumatic amnesia, but if we follow your theories, it doesn't sound like time traveling to me. But an alternate reality,
Samantha whispered. But their theories were interrupted once again. The police force was distracted trying to hold back Annabeth and her followers. Upon closer inspection, it was also noticeable they were trying to hold Toby Clayton back. He was trying to break out of his tent, but his words were lost under the commotion of the crowd. It turned out that this distraction allowed Carla Ruiz to sneak away, not just from the police, but from her own group. The only reason her voice was heard over everyone else's was because everyone got quiet as soon as they noticed she was standing in the middle of the circle made by the markers.
We won't allow you to keep destroying our world! You'll have to kill me if you want to corrupt this space!
Until then, no one dared to cross the inner circle of the markers. In a panic, a handful of police officers followed her inside. Samantha and company, aware of the electric current between the markers, tried to coax them out of that dangerous space. But, in her attempt to be tied to that very location she was trying to protect, Carla Ruiz attempted to stick a metal stick into the ground to handcuff herself to it. The very second the metal touched the ground, a strange and powerful explosion filled up the perfect circle made by the markers. It was fascinating, the way the explosion was completely contained within that limit, just as it was horrifying, watching the bodies of that woman and the police officers that chased her start violently shaking until they temporarily hovered off the ground. Even when it was over and their bodies lay motionless on the ground, smoke was still coming off them. And even then, they weren't the most impressive thing that happened, because when the explosion was over, the marker from which Toby Clayton came from swayed dangerously and finally fell down inside the circle, with the fire at its bottom completely extinguished. The scientists felt their hearts jump at the possibility of studying that disconnected marker, but the risks were still increasing. In the deadly and stunned silence that followed, finally the spectators could hear Toby Clayton, or whichever version of him he was.
Let them in. You have to let the others in,
Toby mumbled in a daze, frightened and sounding entirely different from the adventurous man from the livestream that started this entire ordeal.
We had to escape. We had to leave. We made the portal. You just have to let us in. Only your dimension can save us.
Hey sci-fi horror fans, it's Jordan. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Thank you to all our official members of the channel. Your support means a lot to us. Craving another scary tale? Click on that video on your screen. Until next time, everyone, and remember, stay cosmic.